Welcome back live, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. I'm Porky Pig. That's like the first time I've done that since we've been doing this, man. Mythicist Milwaukee Show. I'm your host, Rob Fumblemouth Moore, the Deacon of Doubt. Here with me, as always, Brian Edward, the Imam of Incertitude, as we keep the all-seeing eye of Horus on the secular movement. What's going on today, Brian?
Hey, does that mean I'm Elmer Fudd?
Perhaps, but we have been named the best-looking duo in podcasts, so congratulations on that. It's been confirmed.
From a blind person.
Yes, indeed. What we do every week is bring you secular guests from around the world of interest, and today is no exception. He's Phil Zuckerman, a professor of sociology and secular studies at Pitzer College in Claremont, California. And he's also an author of several tomes, most recently Living the Secular Life in 2014, and several others. Please welcome Phil from, you in California, Phil? You there?
I'm here. Thanks so much.
Calling us from Claremont. Thanks for being on the show. Most impressively, I think, and where I want to start, you are the originator of the very first secular studies major in the country. Is that true?
It's correct. It's true. But before we start, can I be Foghorn Leghorn?
Yeah, thank you.
Can you give us a little bit of that?
Helping bail me out of my...
Yeah, I just always really liked him. We started a secular studies program here in 2011, and it's very exciting. It's been a lot of fun, and we've had a couple students actually major in secular studies, and we have a lot of students taking our classes. Many of them are not, making the final leap to major in it, but we have great course enrollments. Our curriculum keeps expanding, so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we heard applause. I've never had that behind us here in the gallery, applause when we announced that. And it excites me, too. It's an absolutely fantastic thing to be able to put on your resume that you started the first one. Is it, in fact, one of those degrees right now that's hard to do anything with? Tell us what you do when you come out of school with a secular studies degree.
Yeah, I mean, we're a small liberal arts college, first off, so there's only about 900 students at Pitzer. We're part of the Claremont colleges, though, so we get a bigger swath there. You got Pomona College and Claremont McKenna and Harvey Mudd and Scripps. So there's thousands of students that can take our classes. But, it's just like any degree at a college. What are you going to do with a degree in religious studies? What are you going to do with a degree in linguistics or classics? I mean, it kind of depends if you're looking for an academic track, if you're looking for a professional track, if you're wanting to make money, if you're just wanting to study something that fascinates you. So, I mean, what do you do with an art degree? We got a lot of art majors here. I don't know what they do at a college. And so basically what we say is, look, if this is your fascination, if this is your interest, if you want to understand church-state conflicts, if you want to look at, secularism's rise, if you want to understand atheism, agnosticism, and humanism in the past and the present, I mean, it's a great major for you. But in terms of a job, it's just like getting a degree in anything, with the slight exception that there are no grad programs in secular studies. So at least a student who majors in religious studies or philosophy or classics, if they do want to pursue academia, they obviously could have options whereas there's no graduate programs in secular studies. It's something I'm obviously working on, but that's a hard slog. But what I say to students is, you're just trying to get a bachelor's degree anyway, so any bachelor's degree is going to help you in the job market, whether it's in anthropology or Asian American studies or whatnot. But with secular studies, I think you'd be particularly suited for law school if you want to do First Amendment law. I think you'd be particularly suited for religious studies. I mean, even if you want to pursue religion, having that secular studies background is really helpful. And if you want to pursue social activism, the secular studies degree is helpful. So it's not the most computer science would probably be the most useful, or engineering degree you could get. So it's not up there, but it's still I think relevant for what's going on in the world today.
What about non-majors just taking a course or two? That seems to just what college is about, is absorbing all kinds of knowledge. Do you see that, or is it kind of limited to the people who are selecting this as a major?
No. Our biggest success is among the students who just want to take one or two classes. I would say that the vast majority, 95% of the students that take our classes are majoring in something else, but they want to be exposed to or focus a little bit on secular studies. They want to learn about secularism. They want to learn about critiques of religion. They want to learn about debates about religion and secularism, and so yeah, we get a lot of religious studies majors who, it's so funny. When I started this secular studies program, some of the critiques were, well, you can't just have a degree or a bunch of classes focused on secularism. I mean, because you can't really understand secularism if you don't understand religion. And I would say, I agree. Does it work both ways? And they say, well, sure. I say, well, you've been offering religious studies programs and courses and majors for over 100 years, and you haven't forced students to do anything in the realm of the secular. So now that we're doing that, I feel like we're actually completing something that was started. So yes, we get a lot of students who major in something else, sociology, religious studies, English, philosophy, but they're interested in secularity or secularism, and they take our classes as electives. And that's where we really, I think, are making the biggest impact on the campus, just having that option for students.
Isn't it true that this should have been all encompassed under a religious or a philosophy department anyway, but secularism was actually sort of neglected in those traditional realms? Isn't that kind of what got you going on this anyway?
Yes and no. I think it could have been done. See, the trick there is we're trying to be interdisciplinary. So if you were just to offer it within philosophy, you're going to miss the psychology classes, that look at the minds, brains, neurons of secular people. You'd miss the sociology that looks at secular people, secular demographics, secular movements. You'd miss the political studies aspect that looks at church-state issues, First Amendment issues, laicite, Turkey, India, the whole shebang. So what you would get in philosophy is, you'd get the philosophical stuff, the intellectual history, and what we're doing in secular studies was we're being fiercely interdisciplinary. And the same would go if we were just housed in, let's say, a history department. You wouldn't get any of the contemporary issues. So yes, it could be farmed out into other departments, but what I found was it wasn't being done, and if it was, it would be kind of just a neglected stepchild, whereas now we can just full throttle. We can have history courses that look at the history of free thought, the history of skepticism. We can have sociology classes that look at secular people, secular movements. We have anthro classes that look at secular culture, how do secular people raise their kids, have rituals and traditions, and we can have the philosophy, skepticism, epistemology, existentialism, all that stuff. So in a sense, by having it as its own department, it's a Lollapalooza. It's a frickin' party. Like anything we want to do that's related to secularity, we can do, and we're not beholden to the contours or the requirements of other departments.
Psychology, even biology, I would imagine, of the mind. That's really, really puts it in a different light for me. I didn't think of it in those terms. That's almost like exactly like a brand new idea for colleges around the country. Is there any other universities that have shown any interest in kind of taking up the ball here? Maybe a bigger with a higher profile.
I hope so. I really hope. I mean, the good news, that was the thing. Like Pitzer is a small school and it's got an experimental ethos, so I was able to get it up and running, but it's also a small school, so we don't have a lot of resources and we don't have a lot of students to draw from. And I would love to see a master's program somewhere at a big state university or a big public university where there's just a lot more people. And I get emails all the time from people wanting to pursue secular studies at the graduate level, and I save all those emails to help pitch it to other places. So we'll see.
You could work your way up to a PhD in bald-faced atheism.
I love it. I'm bald, so that helps.
That's great. How about this juxtaposed against some of what I see throughout the rest of the United States, where religious studies programs seem to be increasing? Specifically, even places like Notre Dame and traditionally Catholic schools want an Islamic studies program. And I think the nature of this is trying to create good Islamic scholarship to kind of move it away from, more extreme back to, more what it was in the, say the 1960s, which, is more pluralistic. And it's funny how you could take it from a secular bent, but so many other people feel that it has to be religious. I mean, this seems a wonderful idea.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm thrilled with it, and I think we should be studying religion. We should be studying Islam. We should be studying. These religions play a huge role in the world, in politics, in history, in culture. I mean, any well-educated person ought to have, a working knowledge of the world religions, to be sure. But look, secular people are now a huge chunk of humanity. I mean, according to some estimates, whether it's Pew or not, we're like kind of the fourth largest group compared to other religions in the world. It's it's after Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. Non-religion is number 4 last time I checked, and we're the only quote-unquote religious orientation or worldview that's growing in all 50 states. The religion is so in other words, what I've always argued is you can't really understand humanity if you don't understand what the secular part, because that's a huge chunk. In some countries, it's a majority. I mean,
Right.
in the Netherlands, in Estonia, in the Czech Republic, possibly China, or Japan, most people are non-religious. But even where it's a minority, even parts of Africa, even parts of Latin America, where 8% of people in Brazil are non-religious, but that's even still interesting. Who are those people? And I mean, Jews are less than 1% of the planet. They're less than 2% of Americans, and yet you've got Jewish studies programs everywhere, and that's good. I don't see that as a bad thing, but I want to bring secularity and secularism and all that's related to it onto the table as well.
Now, do you see this as an activist component of your character, or are you more clinical and scholarly about the whole thing?
It depends who I'm talking to. It depends who's watching.
You're talking to activists, buddy.
I think I was more activist in my early days. I was, putting up all kinds of posters on my door and stuff on my cork board, and I was really more in that vein. But once the program took shape, I quickly realized that I had to be a bit more unbiased about it. I had to be more scholarly about it. I had to be more. So I took the posters down off my door and corkboard. Although I do have one about drawing Muhammad. I can't help that. But I've really tried to make it a legitimate. If it's just an activist thing, that's going to fizzle out. It's not going to get any respect. People are going to see through it. And I mean, all disciplines have an activist element. I mean, most sociologists are activists. Most people in academia have an axe to grind that's related to something political. I mean, even if you're teaching English, it's usually, you're assigning books about things you care about or whatnot. So there's always going to be that spirit. But I have tried to steer it in a more legitimate, unbiased, hey, we just want to understand secularity, secularism, the good and the bad. And so I do try to go out of my way to strive for that, and, be intellectual about it, be rigorous about it, be empirical about it. And that's more fruit in the realms of academia. But, I'm still also involved in, the AHA and Free Inquiry and Center for Inquiry. I mean, I'm still involved in the secular community as well, for sure.
Now, they named you one of the most interesting people. Tell us about that. Does that embarrass you? Are you a celebrity?
Did I? I don't know. I'm not aware of that. Was I named in a?
Oh, I wish I'd have saved it. I figured you'd know. I washed over it somewhere. It was the CFI named you. Maybe Joanne knows. Joanne. I think she can find it for us. Somebody named you one of the 11 most intriguing personalities, and maybe it was within secularism. I don't know.
Oh, that's exciting! I can't wait to tell my wife.
Yeah, no, that was great. And I'm like, this guy's all over it.
I might get lucky tonight. Okay.
Tell us about. You've done some research into how countries that are less religious deal with or how they're doing in terms of their success as a society, because the common knock on atheists is that we have no moral center and our society will go to hell if we don't. So tell us about your time in Denmark and what you discovered there.
Yeah. I think that was really my first foray into secular studies. It was before we had the program. It was before anybody had talked about secular studies, and but it was one of those things that was a perfect combination of kind of my political activism meeting my sociology and my academia. I mean, basically what happened was, as you know, and as the listeners of your show I'm sure know, is that there's common tropes common claims that you always are come up against when you're out in secular. And the most obvious one is, well, how can you be moral if you don't believe in God? Mm-hmm. But the other one you'll find at the more public, kind of in the newspapers and the op-eds, in the commentaries, like, if a society loses its religious, values, if it stops worshiping God, all hell will break loose. And I mean, we're getting this still all the time. Scalia Buddha just said it at some speech somewhere where he said, God favors this country because we worship him so much, and he gets mad if we,
Yikes.
I mean, it's like, so to me, that's kind of a sociological claim. It's like, oh, you're saying that the more people worship God, the better their society will fare, and if people stop worshiping God, the society will go downhill. Hey, let's just check that out. And so I knew that Scandinavia were, the nations of Scandinavia are sort of models of what a modern capitalistic welfare state can achieve. I mean, these countries, they're small, but taken together, all the Nordic countries are about 25 million people, so that's nothing to sneeze at. And they went from being among the most poor, unequal societies 150 years ago to among the most equal and wealthy societies today. And they have amazing educational systems, old age care, child care, women's rights, gay rights, you name it. They're kind of a veritable beacon for any progressive person out there. And I also happen to know that they were not very much into religion. They're not strong believers. They have the lowest rates of church attendance in the world. They're culturally Lutheran, but that means nothing in terms of anything supernatural. And so, yes, I spent 2 years in Denmark with my family. My son was born there. I had my wife and my 2 daughters, and they went to the schools, and I taught at the University of Aarhus, and I spent a long time living among and interviewing hundreds of people about their, in a sense, secular worldview, because most of them take a kind of agnostic approach to God. They're not strong atheists, that's for sure. But they're indifferent, which in a way, I try to make this point in my book, Society Without God. Steve Bruce is an amazing, wonderful sociologist up in Aberdeen, Scotland, and he says the end point, the final resting place of a secularized society is not atheism, it's indifference. And his argument was that, to be an atheist, obviously it just means you don't believe in God, but in common culture and politics, it kind of means to be anti-religion or anti those who believe in God. We can debate about that, but there is that connotation in our world. Whereas to be utterly indifferent means you just simply don't care. You don't think about it, and you can only be indifferent if religion is weak and if theists are marginal. That's the only way that indifference can germinate. And that's what I found in Scandinavia, that religion was so weak, so impotent, had no real play in the halls of power, had no real play in any decision-making realms, and was just kind of quaint. They're like Victrola. Religion is like a Victrola or even a record player. Just like, oh, that's nice. My aunt has one of those. How cute. But no one takes it seriously. And so I wrote about kind of the indifference there. And also held them up as case studies or case examples that saying, hey, we can refute the claim that if society loses its faith in God, it will go to hell. I can't make the claim that, secularism in and of itself results in positive society, healthy societal outcomes. That's one could make that claim. That would take a lot more data. Right. All I'm simply saying is we can any time some Mike Huckabee opens his mouth and says, well, if we all believe in God, we wouldn't have school shootings, or people, secularism is destroying the world. No, that can be refuted with examples of places like Scandinavia, and there's many others as well.
Right, and I don't think that secularism, even the United States, is completely lost. I mean, even compared to England, we don't actually have a state religion here. They do. And that many people don't realize how secular they are, and will sometimes attribute or just won't attribute some of their feelings to secularism. Like many moderate Christians, they feel like, well, we're just following the right Christianity, when they don't realize that their Christianity has been secularized. So, I mean,
I totally agree.
I almost feel bad I picture a pastor in a Swedish church, just kind of sad, looking over his dwindling flock. When he was probably a pretty liberal dude, and he's not a hardcore fundamentalist. He's got a job that's going away, and I almost feel bad for him.
It's funny. Okay, so there's a couple things there. Number one, it's a she. The men have dropped out of it. It's the first time in the history of Christianity that there are more female clergy than male. So it's become a totally feminized job, which speaks a lot about the kind of status of women in society and what kind of jobs they are drawn to, or what kind of jobs are open to them. As the position of priest, they call them priests there, even though they're Protestant, has gone down in society, more women have taken up that position, which I think fascinating. But I interviewed many of them, and here's the funny thing. I'll just give you an example. When you're a priest in the Danish Lutheran Church, you are a state employee. You are paid by the government through people's taxes. So you're just like a policeman or a judge or any other civil servant, which is fascinating. You even have a union which is organized that you don't have to preach every Sunday. You get, every fourth Sunday off because your union has negotiated that deal. Even a priest should have a break. You live in the house in town that's owned by the church, which is owned by the country, and is usually one of the most beautiful houses in the neighborhood, and you live in it essentially rent-free. And the funny thing is you would think, oh my gosh, no one's showing up. A lot of them don't care. They're happy, reading and studying and listening. They're just living a good life. And I remember interviewing one priest about, how he only talks to, 5 little old ladies on Sundays. And he said, well, I don't really mind because I like being here in my study and reading old texts and old history and old theology. And I'm not really into public speaking anyway. And I thought only a priest in a state-subsidized church could ever get a gig who doesn't like to speak in front of people.
That's fantastic.
It's really funny. It's really funny.
The little old the little old lady sitting in the pew and 5 people in church is a lot like the Protestant churches left around here. They've all moved to they've all moved to the megachurch. What do you make of the megachurch phenomenon?
Well, it is true. Your standard mainline churches are dwindling, and the only people you're going to see in there have gray hair. That's for sure true. What do I make of megachurches? Whatever. Hey, I know there's a strong communal aspect and a strong communal pull related to religion, and I think if you're living out in Missouri somewhere, why not go to a megachurch? There's probably great child care, Wi-Fi, free Krispy Kreme donuts. They've probably got a good basketball team you can join. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot you can find. I have no problem with the communal hub aspect of megachurches. My only beef, of course, would be with their theology and their politics, and I don't know what those. I don't know what they are specifically, but the ones I've been to, at least, were pretty right wing and pretty fundamentalist, and that obviously I think is damaging to society. But the community stuff, I get it. I mean, we're Americans and we move around a lot, and we're a diverse people, and it's good to have communal hubs.
It's the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. It's about 2:20. We are speaking with Phil Zuckerman. I want to remind everybody about the debate series coming up in March already. Is the first one. I'm grasping at my flyer here. At Shank Hall on March 19th, Richard Carrier and Justin Bass, of course, Richard Carrier, the noted mythicist and great author and researcher, going to present his side of the debate on the resurrection, I guess is the topic, right, Brian?
Are there reliable sources for Jesus' resurrection, specifically?
Indeed. Justin Bass, an evangelist and a fundy, a creationist, I believe. So two opposite ends of the spectrum going at it there. And, of course, that's only the first of 2 really big debates planned for the year. October 21st at Turner Hall, Dr. Robert Price in the long-awaited confrontation with Bart Ehrman himself on the historicity of Jesus. As I say every week, we will decide after that debate who won, and we will then publicize the results. And, in fact, we will then know whether Jesus existed or not. My friend, it'll be fact.
We'll vote on it.
No longer conjecture. Where do you stand on the mythicist bit, Phil? Or do you think there's any? Do you think they were all myths, or do you think maybe there was a historical Jesus that the whole thing was based upon?
First, I have to say I was just at a party with Richard Carrier on Saturday night.
Well, then you had a good time, man. He is the entertainer when he gets at a party.
He's a nice guy. My take, I've read a lot of Richard's stuff. I've read a lot of Robert Price's stuff. I read a lot of Wells's stuff way back when. So I took up that kind of whole history of Jesus. That really intrigued me about 10 years ago. I started reading everything I could. Ann Ehrman stuff, of course. And there's also Freaking Gandhi, I think their name. They wrote a nice one. So I take the position that everything written about Jesus in the Gospels is unreliable, with the possible exception of the negative stuff, when he's cast in a negative light and says, these people don't, respect, I get no respect, what does he say, a prophet's always shat upon in his own town or whatever like that. It's hard for me to believe that propaganda.
That's a paraphrase, but yes.
Say it again?
He said that was a paraphrasal.
Yeah, a beautiful paraphrase, right.
Okay, yeah. So I take the position that I'm still not convinced there wasn't somebody, some charismatic leader, messianic figure who got a following, but it's not the Jesus of the Gospels for sure, because there's just too many plagiarisms from earlier Old Testament sources, too many plagiarisms from pre-existing pagan sources. It's so obvious the way they cobbled together the story. It's so obvious the way they cut and paste. So I'm certain that the Gospel Jesus never existed at all, and it's totally a myth. I'm not yet completely sold that there was nobody and that it was totally concocted out of thin air. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case.
Right. Well, one of the interesting things that I feel is that all the religions can be supremacist and feel like, well, we're the one line that came out of, say, 33 A.D. and when he dies, and we're the real Christians, and everyone else is branched off on us. And I don't think that that's true. I mean, I don't feel like that there was an original human that have always made it, that really you can trace us back, and our ancient ancestors are, small unicellular organisms, and that any religion is not what didn't exist then. All of ours are recent.
I totally agree.
I found the blog. You'll be interested to know, and I can't believe this escaped your notice, where you were named by CNN on May 9th of 2011 one of Monday's most intriguing people, along with Sean Avery, a human rights campaign guy who was a hockey player who supported same-sex marriage. That's pretty rare. Sean Avery. Vernie Reichling, the colonel who commanded, Vernie Reichling, however you want to say it, but Reichling in German. The colonel commands the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Memphis, Tennessee, overseeing official response to the flooding there. Okay.
And here it is.
And here is Phil Zuckerman. He is a president of the first university to offer, or a professor at the first university to offer a bachelor's degree in secularism, according to a report in the New York Times. Pitzer College in Southern California will become the first to offer the subject after Zuckerman proposed the department. Among the courses is God, Darwin, and the Age of Design in America. So there it is, man. That's awesome, right?
Yeah, we've got some good stuff in that. We've got debates over evolution courses called Monkey Business. We've got new stuff going on all the time. It's really fun. And I've had colleagues join up. I've had colleagues who say, "Hey, I want to be part of this," and offer new classes. It's really great.
There's a reason every day to move to California.
Man, but you guys got the FFRF up there, right?
We do. Thanks for bringing that up. Dan Barker, of course, will be a featured speaker at the second debate, along with myself and Allie Jackson of Atheist Republic. Yeah, Dan's tight with us here, and he, of course, is top figure in the movement.
Great debater, too.
Yeah, great debater.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, he is.
He's awesome.
He's going to play a couple of songs for us, like he loves to do, and with that piano bar, that Rye. Who's the guy in Washington who used to do it? That Mark, do the kind of political humor with the ditties. They're kind of corny, but funny. So yeah, Dan will be doing that. So if you get a chance, check out that and come on out and see us. That's going to be a big.
I've always wanted to go to Wisconsin.
Well, wait till October. It's an absolutely gorgeous time of year. You don't want to come in January, my friend, but October can't be beat. But
a lot of Scandinavians up there, right?
Yeah, there is. That's right. We got a lot of Finns up north and Scandinavia. In fact, they brought the free thought movement here. Well, Germans probably more, but the free thought movement was actually alive and well in the 1880s here in Wisconsin, and now we find ourselves struggling against rampant, ridiculous Catholicism and the fundamentalism on the other side with the people who call themselves Christians, like Catholics weren't Christians. Have you run into this, Phil?
I hate that.
Doesn't that bug you? Oh, tell me about it.
Always get that with students. They're like, "Well, I'm Christian." They're not. It's like, oh man, that's annoying.
Nobody knows what a Protestant is anymore, and if you're an evangelical, you're a Christian, and that's what it's come to. I look at it as a rallying of the, circling of the wagons, the mega churches, and this playing to the lowest common denominator of fundamentalism and biblical literalism. Don't you agree that we lose the beauty of the metaphor if you take away, that aspect of Genesis? I mean, who would bother to ruin it by pretending it was literal? You take away all the magic.
Yeah, it's true.
Tell us about
the other one that gets me is when people say they're not religious. Even they hate religion. They have a relationship with Jesus. I mean, that totally. That's like, oh. But what's interesting about that is it shows that there's like been a delegitimizing of religion. Like they don't want to associate themselves with religion anymore. It's a tactical move, which I find pretty fascinating.
Or specifically organized religion.
Right.
Yeah, because a lot of people have, I have a personal relationship, I have a personal religion. I mean, to me, that sounds like your personal philosophy. I wish I would hear that word more often, but it's always the religion that I hear.
Yeah, it's true.
Tell us about the book. Your latest book is not that old, in 2014.
Yeah, it just came out in paperback, and I like the paperback cover better than the hardback, I have to say.
Okay.
But I like them both, so thank you, Penguin. It just came out in paperback, and the idea there was, more and more, as everybody knows, the rise of the nuns, more and more people are opting out of religion, more and more people are saying they have no religion. The percentage just keeps going up and up and up. So, something like 58 million Americans now are adults say they have no religion. 36% of millennials say they have no religion. And, hey, religion's been around for a long time, and it provides a lot of things for a lot of people. It comforts them in the face of suffering. It helps them deal with the notion of dying. It helps them raise their kids. It helps them have morals and ethics. So my question was simply, again, I'm a sociologist, so it's like, all right, if religion has provided all these things for so long for so many people, and now we have tens of millions of people in the United States, let alone around the rest of the world, saying they have no religion, how do they live? So I wanted to do a kind of anthropological, sociological, qualitative, ethnographic portrait of secular culture and secular life.
Cool.
And I find, of course, that it's replete with a lot of goodness and strong positive correlations, as I'm sure your listeners are aware. So I kind of wrote this book for secular people to say, look, this is who we are. This is actually what we do believe. This is how we live. But I also wrote it for our religious aunts, uncles, moms, dads, cousins, and colleagues as a book to say, look, if you don't understand what's going on, if you don't understand me, here you go. And it's not, much to the chagrin of my, some. It's not an assault on religion. I'm not condemned. It's not a condemnation or critique of religion. It's even not really a defense of atheism per se. It's more shedding light on secular living, how secular people actually live, how they look at the world beyond just, whether there's a God or not, how they raise their kids, how they deal with in-laws. And so so to me, there's a lot of really, really, really good news. And basically what I did was I tried to shove in every study I could find that sheds some light on the ways in which secular people are different from religious people. So, rates of child abuse, opinions about guns, like anything. And I try to really paint a portrait here of what secular America is all about, what we stand for, how we're contributing to society, how we make the world a better place. So that's it. And I interviewed people all over the country. I talked to a lot of experts, but I really put all my knowledge, all my sociological data that I've amassed, in secular studies, I thrust into this book and try to make it sort of a very readable book. I mean, it's published by Penguin, so it's meant to reach a wider audience, but I try to ground it in empirical studies, and I try to support all my assertions with data and analysis, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow, that's really cool. Now, how in your book, and I want to give the title called "The Secular Life." Is that correct?
Living the secular life.
Living the secular life. So the religious argument would be, well, I can know that a religious person is good because the base of their foundation is Jesus, and he's divine, and he was good. So how would you explain, like, succinctly what you found within secular life? Like, if somebody was really skeptical of that and saying, well, why is it? Why? How can they do it? How would you say it succinctly? In that secular can be more.
Yeah, the succinct part is tricky. If you ask someone, if you ask a Christian, where do you get your morals, they say the Bible.
Right.
2 words. Or Jesus, 1 word. Or God, 1 word, 3 letters. I mean, and and I do address this head on. So I guess we've got 4 answers. If someone says to me, well, if you don't believe in God and you're not religious, where do you get your morality? I say 4 things. Number 1, the kind of brain I have, which has evolved the capacity for empathy. And empathy is the bedrock of all morality. It allows me to treat people the way I would want to be treated and understand their suffering. Number 2, I get my morals from the people who raised me. Their examples, their day-to-day living shaped me and influenced me to unparalleled degree. Number 3, I get my morals from the surrounding culture around me, which teaches me the norms and values of how to live and how to get along with people. And number 4, experience. I know what it's like to get punched in the face. I know what it feels like when I lied to someone. So, our brains, the people that raise us, the culture in which we live, and the experiences we have all shape our morality. And then if they haven't walked away yet and they haven't gotten to their floor on the elevator, I would say, and furthermore, we can look at the results. We can compare the outcomes. So we can talk about motivations all we want, but let's just look at the results. Hey, strong Christians are more likely to beat their wives than secular people. Strong Christians report higher levels of racism than secular people. Strong Christians are more likely to have assault weapons than secular people. In other words, in terms of results, the data's there. It's not going to be a simple, short answer, but if anybody bothers to look, you can see all the many correlates in the degree to which there are some areas, by the way, where religious people do better. They're more likely to give to charity, for example, than secular people on average. But basically, I talk about the fundamental pillars of secular life, things like empathy, things like independence of thought, critical thinking, skepticism, all the things that, again, I'm sure your listeners are quite well aware of. But what I've found is your average secular person who maybe is not actively involved in secular community, who is not involved in a meetup group, who maybe isn't listening to your show, who doesn't know what the FFRF is or the AHA or CFI, your average secular person who's just living his or her life actually isn't able to articulate what it means to be secular. And I've tried to help them in that sense with this book because I really break it down. Look, if you're secular, these are the values you're probably living your life by. These are the principles you're probably instilling into your children. At least this is what the studies are showing. And so that's what I was trying to really develop.
Do you think there are those who are innocent, like you just described? Do you think there are others who are apathetic, and do you think that's part of the problem?
Well, I don't know if I would call it a problem per se. For example, yes, John Shook talks about apatheists, and I certainly, people just don't care, and that's certainly the main position in Scandinavia where I was for a couple of years. But again, I'm going to go back to that Steve Bruce comment about the end result of secularization is not atheism but indifference. I actually think your average secular person in America is just, like I said, thinking about work, thinking about friends, family, life. And I don't know, the only way I would see that as a problem is in the political realm. So, in other words, I don't want to see the wall between separation of church and state crumble. I don't want to see school boards overrun by creationists. I don't want to see a woman's right to reproductive health, reproductive choice taken away. So, in that area, yes, I would like all those kind of benignly indifferent secular folks to get with the program. But in terms of, I don't think everybody needs to read Christopher Hitchens. I don't think everybody needs to listen to the debate over whether Jesus existed or not. I'm interested in it, but I would never, I just played soccer with a bunch of guys this morning. I don't think they need to go out and read the latest book by Robert M. Price. Sorry, Robert M. Price, I love your work. But what I would like them to be aware of is the way in which the Christian right, for example, may be limiting people's rights in the country. Yes, that's where I think we need to worry. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
It does. And
do you guys agree or disagree?
Well, I like your examples because I see all 4 of them at work in moderate religion in America. Empathy, being raised by your parents, culture influencing religion. If you look at the latest Pew poll, 58 to 70% of Catholics support gay marriage. This is completely against the Catholic teaching. I've read the Cana over and over, but yet, dare you call this person that says I believe in gay marriage not a Catholic? They'll get pissed. Yeah. So, this is secularism, in advance. Absolutely. Even though they may not say it, they'll probably say, no, this is Christianity. Jesus didn't explicitly say things about homosexual. They'll defend it religiously when this secular ideal is invading it. So
I think your point comes from the perspective of a non-activist, like I asked you before, and you're more of a researcher, and you want to get the information out there, and you want to make sure that, and you're not really an activist. For an activist like myself, that apathy is a little bit more stinging when, I don't feel like my neighbor, cares as much about the public intellect as I do, or separation of church and state. And when you say the wall, we don't want to see the wall crumble, I don't want to see it crumble any further.
Exactly. It's so true. It's so true. It's two different perspectives. Especially when you look at these Republican candidates. It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling that this is in 2016. We have people saying, whoever's president should start the day on their knees in prayer. My goodness, it's pretty ridiculous.
Right.
And I think it's true, but I think it's turning a lot of younger people off. I really do. I really do.
It's time for a little segment we like to call Myth of the Day. Our friend Antonio is here, and he always regales us with an ancient piece of mythology topical to our guest, if he can. What do you got for us today, Antonio?
Thank you so much again, Phil, for being on the show today. I'd like to say thank you first to all of the individuals and groups that have tweeted today's show. United Coalition of Reason, Miguel Connor of Aeon Byte Radio, Godless Engineer, a YouTube secular powerhouse, Foundation Beyond Belief, James Kirk Wall of Chicago, and Helmo and the Kenosha Racine area free thinkers, amongst various other groups. Thank you for tweeting today's show with Phil Zuckerman. The Ten Commandments allegedly given by God to Moses on the top of Mount Sinai are evidently related to Egyptian tradition and appear to have common roots with the Egyptian Book of the Dead, especially chapter or spell 125. The Babylonian Code of Hammurabi is likewise considered a possible pre-Mosaic law code that was essentially copied, adapted into the Ten Commandments. Going back specifically to the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The Egyptian Book of the Dead states the following: I have not cursed God. I have not slain men and women. I have not violated the wife of any man. I have not stolen. I have not uttered lies. This also parallels the Holy Bible, which states, Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. And thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. And that is our myth of the day.
Thank you, Antonio. You're listening to the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. We're talking to professor and author Phil Zuckerman. He's got several books, and Brian's got a question. Go, Brian.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if, Phil, if your book gets into this, because a lot of times in my debates with, the moderate or liberal Christians, I end up always saying, we have more in common than what we disagree about. But one of the things that is always a sticking point is, but what's the meaning of life? To ascribe to your position, Brian, and an atheist agnostic, it seems depressing. I would lose it. I prefer mine. So what comforts do you talk about, can you give in your book, that give atheists comfort about death or the meaning of life? I mean, can you get at that from a secular perspective?
Oh, yeah, I do that head on. I have a whole chapter on death, and I have a lot to say about the meaning of life, and others have a lot to say about it as well. So which one do you want, meaning of life or death?
Ooh, I don't know. Could we get both? I don't know which to pick.
Monty Python gave us the meaning of life, so give us the meaning of death.
Well, I would say if there was one word that describes, there's many secular approaches to death, and I explore many aspects, but if I had to take one single word, it's acceptance. So there are secular people that don't care about dying, don't worry about it. There are those that worry about it and fear it, but both of them understand that it's going to happen. It's the natural order of things. You look out at the world, and everything that lives dies. I'm staring out my window right now, and I see trees that have died. I see a squirrel. Well, no, they're alive, but I know they'll be dead soon. I see, an airplane flying, but I know that whoever's in that flying that is going to one day be dead. And that does not seem to paralyze secular people. Sure, there's the odd Sunday night where you can't sleep, staring at the ceiling thinking, oh my God, I'm going to die. I have interviewed people who have been diagnosed with a terminal cancer. I have who are now dead. I have interviewed people who were 98 years old. I interviewed a woman who died. She had a heart attack and her heart stopped for a full 14 minutes, and they know because she had a pacemaker in that recorded the entire thing, and she came back to life. I've interviewed so many people, and all of them say, look, they don't want to die, but they don't They don't think there's anything beyond. It wouldn't make sense. Everything that lives dies, and so there's just a general, real deep acceptance. And I think that's a healthy way to look at the world. And it doesn't breed despondence. It doesn't breed depression. If anything, it breeds a kind of here and nowness. We need to make the most out of life as we can. This is all we get. It spurs activism. It spurs a love of life and of the things of this world, an appreciation. So this is not I've yet to meet or interview a secular person I don't care if they're where in the world, who's just sort of been frozen because they know they're going to die, and they just nothing, and they can't live, they can't move on. I think people get in that state, whether they're secular or religious, and it's related to some aspect of depression. So I don't find that atheism, that it, in any sense, the notion that we're not going to live forever has any kind of paralyzing effect on people. Quite the contrary. It spurs them to creativity, it spurs them to love, and basically live life. And I'll just speak from personal experience. About a year or so ago, maybe a little bit more, I had a fever that wouldn't go away. I had a fever for 6 weeks straight.
Wow.
And they couldn't figure it out, and it finally got to the place of, well, you could have Hodgkin's, you could have leukemia. So I'm in the oncology centers, I'm in the cancer wards, I'm being tested. They're looking at bone marrow, they're looking at everything, and the prospects were not good. And I did a lot of crying, I did a lot of fearing, I did a lot of depression. I never once thought, oh, maybe I'll live on. Like, that just didn't, no. It's to us, it's kind of absurd and silly. And miraculously, I prayed to Pan and got better. No, Pan had nothing to do with it. It was called fever of unknown origin. Fortunately, the bad news came back good, but that's not the case for other. I have many friends who have died of cancer. Right. I have many friends who, so I don't know, on the whole death thing, in my book, I talk about different aspects of death. I talk to Peg Sandine, who heads Death with Dignity. I've even talked to funeral directors who see that more and more people are wanting to have secular humanist funerals, more so than religious funerals. So there's a lot of angles I look at. But again, ultimately, it's a sort of acceptance, which does not breed a depressive, paralyzed state, but actually breeds an appreciation for the things of this life. And so that's the one on death there. And of course, it is related to the meaning of life. If you want to get to that, we can.
Tell us about your own religious background. Were you always secular, or you were raised by religious folk? I'm in that strange category known as the Jew. So we are a kind of often seen as a religion, but we're often non-believers. In fact, non-belief is among the highest among Jews in the world. So I was raised in a Jewish home by two non-believers who themselves were raised by non-believers. So I'm a third-generation non-believer. My grandparents were strong atheists on my dad's side. They were pretty mild agnostics on my mom's side. My dad an atheist, my mom an agnostic, but we still were involved in Jewish community. We celebrated some Jewish holidays. I was bar mitzvahed at a very liberal, progressive synagogue. So I always understood the kind of communal aspect of religion, the congregating aspect, the celebratory aspect, even the music and food aspect. But the supernatural belief I never had. It was never imposed on me. And in fact, I grew up in a very secular part of LA, Pacific Palisades. It's near the beach, near Santa Monica. I grew up in the 70s. Almost nobody was religious. I never knew a family that went to church on Sundays. I never went to anybody's house that said grace before a meal. So I really didn't come face to face with religion until my first girlfriend when I was 15. She was the daughter of a non-denominational preacher who came out from Kansas to save the heathen in California. So, wow.
So that's kind of my background.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's been my observation as a guy who received a liberal religious education in New England. It's been my observation that most modern Jews are atheists for all intents and purposes, and really sort of celebrate a secular tradition, like many lapsed Christians do, where we love Christmas and you have a great time with family. But it's we have the empirical evidence there for it as well. I mean, most
Jews are quite secular on the belief scale. They might still be very much belonging with their community. They might do a lot of the ritual traditions, but when it comes to belief, it's not high on the list there. And so most Jews are quite secular. I mean, it's just so so yes, that is for sure. And why that is, I've never been able to quite figure out. I think it's got historical roots, and there's something going on there too. I think without the religion of Judaism is not a kind of faith-based tradition, as it were, in the same degree that Christianity is. For example, when I was in grad school, I was studying fundamentalist Jews, and I had a friend in grad school who was studying fundamentalist Christians, and it was interesting because she was always being asked by the people, like, are you saved? Have you found Jesus? Like whenever she'd interview someone in this group, they'd always at the end say, like, Lynn, have you found Jesus? Have you, no Orthodox Jew ever gave two craps if I believed or not. All they cared about was that I came out of a Jewish womb, and then I was good to go. So the belief didn't really matter, as long as I was, not eating a cheeseburger or something, then I was cool. So yeah, Jews are an interesting study. But, I actually, in Scandinavia, I was surprised that the Lutheranism in Scandinavia is a little bit operates very similar to the way Judaism operates here in the United States or for Jews around the world, where it's a cultural thing, it's a heritage thing, it's a grandma and grandpa thing, it's not a faith thing, and it's not a supernatural thing. And I actually think that is a possible window. I part of me thinks, like, man, if people aren't going to become atheists or humanists or whatnot, hopefully their religions then can at least become desupernaturalized. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see people doing their Catholic rituals, just not believing X, Y, and Z. I'd love to see people doing even their Mormon stuff and just not believing what I would call the sort of silly nonsense.
I think we do see that from a former Christian who just gave it up when I started thinking for myself in high school. It's absolutely like that among a certain probably 15 to 20% of Christians who just love the tradition and identify as cultural Christians and give lip service to God if they even believe at all anymore. But I do have to say that it's ironic that the Jews who aren't atheists are actually responsible for the entire rest of the problem, aren't they? By providing the guidebook in the Torah for creationism.
Well,
that's right. I just saw this funny YouTube video. It was called like Jewish Atheist or something, because my daughter's always having problems. She always comes home from school. She's in high school, and she identifies as Jewish, but she also identifies as atheist. So she's always having the same conversation where students are like, "What? I thought you were Jewish." Well, yeah, but you don't have to be. She's like, "I don't believe in God, but it's still my people." And so I looked up on YouTube and I found this thing, Jewish Atheist, and it said, like, in the beginning, Jews came up with a bunch of fairy tales. They also value education. This was going to cause problems later on, and it was, and I think
awesome.
There's some truth there.
I was going to say that's why it's happening. Is Jews are generally educated, and it's been shown through studies that the more educated you are, the more likely you are to be a secular thinker.
It's true.
It's 2:50. We got about 10 minutes left. It's the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. I want to urge everybody to go to the website and support our efforts. If you like what we do, and how could you not? It's friggin' fantastic. Go to the website, mythicistmilwaukee.com, and consider becoming a member. There's a couple of different options that are very affordable, and you'll help us keep the lights on around here. Also, we have a Patreon page. You can pledge as little or as much as you'd like. We've actually done the analytics. Brian is the CFO, and we actually need 1746 from everyone today. So go to the Patreon page. Get your 17. Was it 1746, right, Brian?
Yeah, we're gonna make up numbers, just like we're gonna make up scripture.
There you go. In our remaining moments with Phil Zuckerman, what do you got going on? What's first in your mind? You got something new, a new project, a new book? What's up with Phil coming forward here?
I do have a new book. I co-wrote it with Luke Galen in Michigan and Frank Pasquale, who's out in Martha's Vineyard right now. And the idea was, I tried to write, my Living the Secular Life was really for a popular audience. I was kind of hoping it would be the kind of book that you could pick up in an airport. But we wanted to do a real, definitive, empirical, scholarly work for secular studies that brought it all together. So I have a background in sociology. Luke is in psychology, and Frank is in anthropology. So we've got a new book coming out in March called The Non-Religious, Understanding Secular People and Societies, and it's basically what I'm hoping will be just the kind of go-to foundational book. We put every study we could find from sociology, psychology, anthropology that sheds any kind of light on secular people and society into this one volume, and it's by Oxford University Press, so it's much more academic than my latest book, and that's coming out in March, and I hope it gets assigned in universities around the country, and I just want it to be kind of like the go-to book on the research on secular life.
Wow. You got a tidbit for us, or one like little cool outtake from that you
Oh man, let's see. Cool outtake from that. Let me see.
Put it on the spot,
let me think. There's so many. I guess for me, Let's see. I really like the stuff about racism personally. There was a study done with some people at USC and Duke that they wanted to talk about the correlation between, I mentioned this earlier, between religiosity and prejudice or lack thereof. And they wanted to look, and they did a meta-analysis of 55 studies that tried to measure people's religious identity and their degrees of racism. And lo and behold, after analyzing 55 random sampled national studies, they found that the least racist folks were agnostics, followed by atheists. So, here they were trying to find, how racism affects, and maybe reduces racism, and they actually found that racism is highest among the most religious and lowest among the least religious or most secular. And it's that kind of stuff that I really love. And also so it's replete with factoids like that on almost every topic you can imagine.
Right. Maybe the reason, I'm just going to kind of speculate, is that when you have a religion, you're going to have some people that view that as a supremacist religion, and therefore you can get you can come up with racism as being a good thing. And I think you have less of that. Not that you couldn't be a supremacist atheist, but you probably have less. I mean, what do you think? Did you come up with conclusions of why, or was it more, here's the data?
Yeah, we tried our best to explain and understand, and you have to think, okay, is it related to something else? Is it educational levels? Is it class standing that's really influencing? But in some of these studies, we were able to control for that. For example, with the homophobia, we've got studies where we hold these things constant. We weed them out. Race, class, educational, and still secular people are far less homophobic than their religious counterparts. So. On the race question, I think it does have to do with education, but I also think it has to do with, I think there's a tribalism that comes with religion that is, I think, one of its, I can praise religion and say a lot of good that it does, but when I want to put on my critical hat, one of the biggest, I think, is that religion contributes to us versus them thinking. It contributes to we're saved, they're damned, or we're part of the community, they're out. We know the truth, they don't, they're living in lies, and there is this kind of us versus them aspect to religiosity that increases tribalism, increases nationalism, and I think increases racism and prejudice as well.
Yeah, and tribalism can get absorbed into religion and passed off as religion.
No doubt. Look at Northern Ireland.
Yeah, and I think you see the same thing in parts of Islam where the tribalism has started to usurp or at least increase its way in there. I mean, that Saudi Arabia versus Iran is a great example of that right now.
Absolutely.
Well, I think you've got a real niche going on here with what you're doing. Honestly, unique guest for us. No, Brian, really kind of different. I mean, we've talked to everybody on all sides of the movement, and this I'm really fascinated by what you do, and you're clearly passionate about it yourself.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I really do like the non-majors taking some of these courses because I might take a religious course just to do it. Again, doesn't mean anything other than I want to learn, and this is an option. This is a great idea. I really like that.
Absolutely. No, I thank you for that, and I thank you for the interest and for calling me and setting this up. I really do appreciate it.
Not at all. He's Phil Zuckerman. You can check him out if you just Google him. He's really active. There's YouTube clips of speeches. I listened to one on the way in to give me some ideas here. Tell us about the time you interviewed a devout Mormon, Cecilia. Was there some fun in that? You got about 4 minutes. Oh,
which one? I've interviewed a lot of devout Mormons. Which one? Right.
Suggestion.
No more. Yeah, I did a book on apostates, people who rejected their religion, and what I found was that, well, for her, she was tired of wearing the underwear. It just started there. It was hot. She was sweating all the time, and there were other things, but that was the trigger that it ended with her becoming a full-fledged apostate. But what's interesting about Mormons is that it's a lot harder for them, I think, to walk away from their faith because it's such a total community, a total world, friends, family. There's things throughout the week, every morning. I mean, it's a lot harder to break away from that faith than say a kind of mainline Christian faith or liberal Jewish faith or whatnot.
It's a mega cult. Go ahead and say it. It's a mega cult.
I try not to use that word.
I know, I'm teasing.
Well, and I had the examples. Specifically on gay marriage, the Mormons came in at 24 to 36% approving of it.
Wow.
Where the
Wow.
only one lower Jehovah's Witness between 12 and 16. And I think as diversity of thought decreases, the cult-like starts to increase.
Yeah, absolutely.
But obviously, the fact that 12 to 16% of Jehovah's Witnesses, I thought it would be like 0 to 1%.
Yeah,
shows
I
that
agree.
that's cool.
There's been movement there.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that Mormons could come out in favor of any form of traditional marriage is ridiculous, given their history. I mean, they should be the first ones
That's true.
support it. That's just insane.
That is funny. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, right? Who are they? The casting
Yeah.
stones about bizarre religions.
Yeah,
And,
and I wouldn't mind of like having you on again and to actually talk a little bit more about the meaning of life. We won't be able to get into it now, but
I'd love to.
that would be
I'd love
fun.
it. It's one of my favorite topics.
Unlock the key for us. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. He's Phil Zuckerman. Check him out. Living the Secular Life, available at Amazon, all the generalist Penguin Books, you said, right?
Yes, indeed.
And look for the new
How
book.
much does that cost?
You can get it on Amazon for like $8.
$8. Not too bad.
In paperback.
Good deal.
He likes the paperback
Yeah.
better even. He said he said he liked the cover.
Yeah.
Stay on the
I
line
do.
after we get off, Phil, here, and we'll talk for a second. We are
Sounds good.
about out of time. Join us next week for Karen Garst. She is a secular author and learned speaker and interesting guest for next week. So thanks for joining us on the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. That's all we got. Take it easy, everybody.